name. Okay. So I can hit that. Hit that. It'll give me exactly what I want from the post. So that's how I'm doing it. I'm just saying, I want this information. It has all of the information over here in my little explorer, so I can pick out things I want. I can just even do checkboxes if I wanted to. I can pull custom post types. I can pull any of the nav menu data. I can just pull that. Pull anything I want. So this query we're going to use later, and it goes right into our JavaScript application. Which we're going to get to next. So there's no right answer for any of this stuff, by the way. Every application has its own answer. Everyone has a different development team which might know certain things better or worse. So you really have to pick one. There are different ways of setting this up, though. Like, for example, you can have it, the original example that we were using in Gatsby, it will build the entire application and make it static. And then I built one in React that was pulling it live. Obviously, some pros and cons, depending on what you're doing it with both of those. But we're going to show you a little bit about what that looks like. Do you want to go first? You want me to go first? Okay. All right. So what I did, oh, look, is built. This is just static pages running my React app off of GitHub. And so it's pulling down my post, obviously, the post title, and the author name, and then I can click on Read More, and then it pulls down the content of the post, so standard WordPress information. But I also did a video, so it's a custom post type of a video. I can show you that in a minute. But so if I click on the video one, it loads all of my custom post types of videos with the same post title, author, and then video. What that looks like is not here. Here. Okay. So I have just a really basic, super basic React app, which is very small. Let me see if I can. Will that work? Look at that. Yay, touchscreen. Okay. So I'm just importing posts and video pages, and I'm using Apollo as my GraphQL client to pull in that information. And then I'm just giving it different paths to go to based on what the URL is. Let's see. Go back one so you can see what that looks like. So when we made the GraphQL in graphical earlier, you can see what that looks like here. Because I can paste this query directly into my React app to pull all of my information down, and then just pull it up. Can you see that? Sorta? It's kind of small. Here. That bigger? Okay. Okay, so I pulled all of my information down exactly as I had it in my GraphQL, and then put it right into my React app. Right here. It's making sense, sorta? Okay, cool. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, it basically, I just worked out my query, how exactly I wanted, put it right in there. It's really easy to do when you have this sort of tool, because then you can kind of work it out and play with it and get the live data, and then put it right in there. So the same goes if you have, say you have a custom post type. Go back. So there is my, you'll see instead of using post, I'm now using that custom post type, which was videos. to put the information in there, and it pulls it just the same. So I can pull the information just the same, putting my video information right into the. I can kind of see that. It gets small. I'm old. I don't know. Okay. So yeah, this exactly works the same if I want to look up a custom post type. So you'll see I put it in video. Actually, I think it's videos. We'll see in a minute. Yes, there it is. Okay. So that was my custom post type I made earlier, and then I can take that query, paste it right in my React app, and build it out to make it work like that. This is some ridiculous dude that my 10-year-old loves, so gotta go with that. Yes, yes. Yes. It's not a supported plugin. There is a plugin. I mean, it's a direct plugin. Well, the WordPress plugin. So there's two. One is the GraphQL, which gives you the API, and then the other one is the graphical plugin, which gives you the little tool to see your queries.
So it's not something that would come in a bare WordPress?
Nope. You have to. The REST API does come with WordPress standard. To get the GraphQL, you have to install something to enable it. The other thing you have to do is that you have to go to. I'm going to show you this real fast. When I made a custom post type. Oh my God, there's so much stuff in here. Okay. No, here. Okay. When I made a custom post type, I have to specifically tell it. Can you see that? I had to specifically tell it to enable GraphQL on that custom post type, otherwise it won't show up in my standard queries. So those are the two things I did. I had to install the plugin, and then I had to enable, for any custom kind of data, I had to enable it to show up in GraphQL. So, you want to talk about Gatsby?
Yeah, ready for it.
Okay, so for the next implementation. Okay.
So with GraphQL, you could do, I bet like select queries if I'm talking to MySQL. Can it also delete and update entries in a database? It seems like it has a lot of access to the database.
It's not actually accessing the, it has an API between the things, so it's not actually doing direct contact with the database. No. No, you can only query information. You cannot directly change the database. No, it's really.
That's what your CMS would be for. This is just kind of your So this would be your presentation layer. So you still the benefit of this is you get your WordPress, you get that whole UI that's had tons of years of development to go behind it, to have a really user-friendly place to make your content. And then once you go headless, it's more for getting your presentation layer out there, so then you're no longer coupled to the WordPress way of presenting things. In fact, you can send your content to anyone who can consume your API, which then makes your content a lot more flexible and adaptable to whatever you need it for. Which brings us to our oh yeah, question?
I guess to clarify,
Yeah.
so if I'm understanding this correctly, essentially you're sending your GraphQL request, and wherever it's being received is going to translate that into whatever SQL query it needs to actually get that data.
Yeah, because GraphQL does a great job at sort of mitigating front-end, back-end communication. So it enables you to describe what you want, and you don't have to do as much like diplomacy back and forth. It's a description. You create this endpoint, one endpoint, kind of to rule them all, and then describe your data on your presentation layer. So then it takes care of having all of that data relationally mapped through your database that it's plugged into. Yeah.
Can you use that same kind of API to make things, like to,
Yeah, GraphQL is super flexible. With this way of doing it, it's really just to query and get data, but otherwise, like Facebook runs off GraphQL, and then that's where you have mutation layers and a complete, REST solution. If you were to kind of think in those terms.
So if there was a REST API available to change the data in your database, you could use GraphQL to do that.
Yeah, through what they call mutations. So yeah, GraphQL is completely CRUD enabled. With this instance, that's not necessarily its use case. But if you're running a full GraphQL server and application, yeah, then of course you'd want to be able to do mutations and subscriptions as well, so you can have live updates to things in the full GraphQL experience.
It seems like we would benefit from a GraphQL talk.
Apparently.
The WordPress implementation kind of limits those things that you can do. Like, it doesn't have the full capability of it for security reasons. Like, it just doesn't want you to do that stuff. So if they want you to go do whatever you're going to do with WordPress, they want you to go do that stuff with WordPress. It's basically just to put a front-end layer on it. So it's not the full capability of the technology. No. Do you want the...
So unless there's any other questions, I have a cool implementation that I've been wanting to experiment a lot more with, and that's Headless WordPress with Gatsby. Does anyone know what Gatsby is besides people who are around me and hear me talk about it?
I did see this Gatsby.
Sweet. What? Really?
Bishop can talk about it.
Y'all spun up Gatsby? Oh, no way. Jamstack. Jamstack's my jam. And this is sort of an implementation of that. Jamstack, it stands for JavaScript APIs and markup, which it's trying to kind of separate concerns in a different way than before, where you have a JavaScript application that's just hitting an API for its data and injecting that into some markup that you have. So with this instance, we have Michelle running her WordPress instance. That's somewhere else, and it really doesn't matter for what I'm concerned with. I'm more of a front-end person currently, and she provides just an endpoint for me to consume. And what's great is it's when you consume that, then you build something else with it. And what Gatsby is able to produce is a super optimized generated site that can run on a CDN. And so it's super cheap to host, and it's really scalable, and it's extremely safe as well, because you don't have a database running that's close to your users. It splits this, and all you have is the data and site that you've generated. So I have a couple of implementations on here, and it's more proof of concepty now, just as far as my own skills and time has brought me here. So so Gatsby is a React framework that's really opinionated, and it runs on top of GraphQL. So the Gatsby way is it runs its own GraphQL server, and you plug in sources to that. And you can source from just about anywhere or anything. So with this, I'm getting there's a source plugin for GraphQL, for WordPress that just consumes the REST endpoint. And I can just plug that into my Gatsby instance. Is this super tiny for everyone? Yeah, let me bump that up. Sweet. It's this plugin here. This plugin here, it completely eats the entire REST API and gives me absolute access to everything. However, it's not via REST. When I use this, I'm not making REST API calls. Gatsby consumes it and turns it into GraphQL, which means it's completely relational, and when it does its build, everything, you can use that relational data to inform and build out your UI. So that's a thing about Gatsby. It's a little bit different. Yeah, question?
So since there's GraphQL already in there, does that mean that you do not need the WordPress plugins that get instead of?
So with this instance, we actually don't need the WordPress bit that she spits out. You can plug in any WordPress site, and there's developers that are, so you have, say, your company or your personal blog, and you have hundreds of posts and tons of content, but you don't want to transfer all of that over to some other content management system or some other stack. What you can do is Gatsby can consume this whole thing and then build out your site that way with it, sort of a bring your own front end approach. So yeah, and it essentially here you define all the different routes or all the different bits of that REST API that you want to consume. You can consume even more, and it can get out of hand. Gatsby pulls all of that. So what makes Gatsby fast and what it does is it is a progressive web app generator is what they say, but also kind of static site generator where it will build everything at build time, so it just does that one pull. So it makes that available for you here. So it's already made 74 pages. So you can see, let's just go to, not my work Slack, but to, where's the graphical? Oh, that's not even it either. Localhost. Yes.
Yeah, so the problem with this is it's very fast, right? Because you're making static site. The con is that if you update anything, it doesn't live update it. It's not pulling it, you know, as you load the app. So you would have to build it, and then you have to rebuild it, or continuous build, or use some sort of device to continuous build in order to get new data from WordPress. Did you?
Can you distinguish between what things are doing at real time and runtime? Because in theory, you can also use JavaScript, so it would still be a static site.
Right. There is a way to set it up that way. But the way that he had done it specifically when it pulled down the entire, it's basically going to the WP JSON path. It's pulling down everything. So it's pulling down menus, it's pulling down all the posts and pages, it's pulling down everything. So there was a little bit of people having problems if it, you know, the database got quite large, of it having to process all of that. But yes, you can do it the other way. It just happens to be that this method did not. It's obviously fastest to have it static, but if you had something like, you know, something that was like a news site or something like that, that'd be continually having new posts, that would probably not be the best. But say you had a static site that was like, you know, just a marketing site, or you had something that was like a video purchasable product, right? And it's so the files are relatively the same all the time. Great, just build it, you know, whatever at time, and then have it load statically. You can even spin down WordPress and not even have it running at all. Just spin it up, you know, drop it in a container, spin it up, build your Gatsby, spin it back down, and that's all you have is your, you know, your files on, you know, some bucket.
So for those of you who've had a lot of fun building queries to get stuff, what's nice about the graphical editor is they've just made this update where you can literally just do these checkboxes and it fills out your template for you. Or it also has like some autocomplete in here, so you can get what you want. And then this query is, so you sort of build out what you would want to fill into a template. And as you can see here, it gets a whole lot of these posts and these pages that it's ready to consume. So that's kind of the basics there. And with Gatsby, since it's doing these things at build time, there's a special messy file where it sort of gets this. So if you guys recognize, this was one of our queries that we just made. So you'll have, this file runs right before, or during build time rather. So as you spin up a dev server or if you build your site. And I have some other queries in here of some information. But anyway, grabs your whole query. It's async await. And once it gets your data, Gatsby has a helper function called createPage where you give it a path. Define your path that you want, define what component you want it to use. And lastly, you give it some context to that component that it'll go in when it builds that page. And that's pretty much it for page generation. So we're able to make 74 pages in, I forget how long that took. It was like 30 seconds to kind of spin up everything and consume what we currently have. So if we go over to templates, kind of get an idea what's going on. In the template, it will run this query. When it gets spun up, you can pass in variables as it goes. So we get a WordPress ID, and then all of our different WordPress data, title, content, excerpt, yada, yada. And then lastly, we fill out a little template. Those of you familiar with React and JSX and all that. We grab our data that gets injected in here and then start sprinkling it through our whole page. And the final product here is a super snappy site. Oh, I guess we can zoom this in one other place. Oh, whoops, in posts. Haha, this is fun to do one-handed. And lastly, on our homepage, I made posts. This is just sort of a quick little bit. So building links to as far as everything that we have in our GraphQL server at the time. So it does a query at the top of the file here. It grabs all WordPress posts and some data along with it, and then it just loops over that data to then build a gazillion links that then all show up here. I wasn't able to get the live post link, so we're just going to ignore that for right now. And if you see here, every single one is nice and built out and super snappy. And it loads just instantly because it's super cheap HTML and CSS. And the final thing that I really appreciate Gatsby for is what it's able to do with images. Because you have GraphQL that's in the basis of your whole build system, that enables you to do a lot of things. And this is just kind of the beginning, is a lot of these posts will have images with them. And since GraphQL is aware of everything, it's relational, you're able to get different plugins like Image Sharp, which can go through and it can optimize all of your images to whatever your specification may be. If you want to slice it up into 10 different photos, depending on quality, and spit out a couple of different formats, maybe WebP if you want to be able to be on the cutting edge of things, and have it all responsive to when the client calls it, it does all of this for any image that you provide in your whole build system. So you don't have to go to services like Cloudinary, or you don't have to run your own like AWS, like Lambda to do your image processing for you. It's just built into your build process and you get to develop around it. So that's just one advantage of using this as like in your build process, is everything is aware of itself, so you're able to have different transformers take your data and do more with it. That's there.
Does that plugin exist on the Gatsby side, or would that exist in WordPress?
That's on the Gatsby side. WordPress just gives me whatever WordPress wants, and then Gatsby's able to take that and digest it all.
There is a way to do it on the WordPress side. You can use something like the S3 media offload. You can actually take, say, take Optimus. Optimus will take all your WordPress images. They will compress them. They will convert them to the WebP format, and then you can take S3 offload and push them all to a bucket from WordPress the second people upload them. So then these JavaScript applications wouldn't be pulling in the images. They would just automatically be linking to the images already in the bucket. So there are ways to process this stuff on the WordPress side if you want to do that. I actually read something really funny because someone said they were moving to Headless because they had a WordPress studio that was full of JavaScript developers. So apparently they didn't have any WordPress devs in-house, which is kind of the funniest reason I've ever heard of moving to a new technology. But that's what you can do. Like if you only have one, you have a bunch of front-end guys and then you only have the one WordPress person, then they can set it up and have the other guys build out the entire front end and not have to worry about it, kind of thing. So if you're going to go more processing on the front end, more processing on the back end, it really depends on what's good for the setup and what's good for whoever the team you're working with, basically. Because you have a backend UI that is set up for people to use, that you're not having to rebuild the whole thing because the thing exists. There are some pros and cons, and we're going to get to that. But, right. So they can use their whole admin that they're used to using, and they can plug in their little post and upload their images, and these things like S3 offload and the Optimus plugin and things like that can still work, and you don't have to rebuild all of these because they exist. I mean, there's even a way to take all of your WordPress stuff, and the second that you make a post, it'll actually send the JSON for that post to a S3 bucket and then spin down again. So it's just like it's never up, but it's there for users to use it. They just don't see what happens on the back end. But you can still use things like, forms, and that stuff will still come through. For example, when I was making the video things, I just had to paste the YouTube URL in there, and WordPress automatically made those into, iframe code without me doing anything. So that's already there, and I can already use that, and it already has the database backing, and I don't have to do any more of that stuff. Right, but if you've ever had to coach someone through that, it's so much easier just to paste a URL. It is, yes. But I'm just saying, if I literally just trying to get people no click on that thing, no click on that thing, just paste the URL. It'll do it. Right. Yep. There's a large percentage of people who are not developers, they're not technical people out there who can use WordPress because it's a lot like just making an email in Gmail, and they can figure that out. And it has the backing, and it has people working on that stuff constantly, and you don't have to reinvent that whole wheel. So, are you done with yours?
So I have two more things to show with this of just how Gatsby can consume things. It can also get things just by using the GraphQL endpoint that WordPress spit out. And that's also just as easy as a plugin that someone has provided. And it's just Gatsby source GraphQL, and you can put in any GraphQL endpoint you want in here to then consume while you're building your site. And with this, we have Nicole's headless GraphQL endpoint there. And then you call it whatever you want, and you can see it in your graphical. Right down here is WP. This gives you a little bit less because it's not providing the entire site. And you have to do some more stuff to get image processing to get out of this for different images that your WordPress users just put inline in their posts or whatnot. The Gatsby source, the WordPress source plugin that we were first using, it is able to sort of plug into that a lot easier. And lastly, you can, just with this system, you can also use WordPress so at runtime as opposed to build time, just by using things like Apollo. So it's essentially the same thing that Nicole was using, but I just wanted you guys to see the different speed. So this is how long that request takes from getting all the way to your WordPress server, doing a query and grabbing your post and coming back. It's still a couple of seconds, and it's only for like some text. Versus any of these things that are actually built out, something I haven't clicked on, it's instant. Is really a big use case. If you have a marketing site, a business site, things where your content doesn't change more than once a day, then you can probably run a static site generator. And if you do need to get things that are dynamic, you can still implement those kinds of details there. And Apollo has really great caching, and that's so just by even using GraphQL for your dynamic content, you can still get good caching. You can still get a lot of the things that we've grown used to with REST. So that's my spiel there. Oh yeah, any questions about some of that? Yeah. Yeah, so everything's NPM managed, and Gatsby's coming out with some real cool stuff called themes, not to be confused with WordPress themes, but imagine if you could take like business logic and components, like React components, and make that as its own package that you can maintain outside of its instance, and it's kind of a cool frontier that's going on. So I actually use an Apollo theme, which in order to get just Apollo plugged in, it was an NPM install, and it helped me wire everything up the back. I had to create one file and add some stuff in a config, and then I have Apollo running. I'm on the front end. So there's a lot of cool developer friendly things that are going on in that area. Any other questions kind of about the weird Gatsby instance and consuming that stuff? Yeah.
Since I've worked with Gatsby, I'm trying to get a bit of a mental model for the distinction between where the code is that is controlling the build process versus the end result. And so for example, where you would write the stuff if you did want to do a real request at runtime rather than at build.
Yeah, that's just a regular React component. So at the end of the day, you're writing React, and it's server-side rendered React, so you can't use things like window or whatnot. But yeah, and it's just regular old component. And if you did want to do calls either like on component did mount or use effect or whatever you happen to be doing. Anyone using hooks with React development? No one? This is not a React place. Who actually writes React here? Sweet. Yeah, it's great. Definitely, I would say go for hooks. Hooks make things a lot easier. We'll talk about that later. That's yeah. So otherwise, it's just React underneath it also. If you wanted like use other systems, Vue has great ways of doing this as well. Angular, Vue, I know. There's Vue Press, which I haven't really looked into, or Gridsome, which is kind of the equivalent of Gatsby. It's that static build, GraphQL under the hood, image stuff, so it's kind of the same thing. So there's a lot of different people that are consuming this in a similar way because of the developer experience behind it. And you get a pretty kick-ass product. So.
So the pros and cons that I said I was going to get to. We talked about some of these: super fast, very scalable. The security involved, that you can spin up and spin it down your WordPress installation. Your database is probably one of the weakest links of WordPress. You're also not using all the plugins that people use with WordPress, so much more secure that way. The JavaScript loading, we didn't really show this a lot, but the way that it can do the new generation formats of images and stuff like that, it leaves a placeholder. So when you're viewing it on mobile, it doesn't do a lot of the jumping stuff. This is more of the progressive web app type of things, but it's just a better experience. But you can also put it on IoT devices. It doesn't have the limitation of just being in the browser, obviously. The super cheap hosting, if I only have to spin up my database when I need it, I can keep it in a container and I don't have to continually pay for hosting time. The static files, super cheap to host. And your users can't mess with your front end, which kind of happens. They're like, oh, I'm going to make the colors a different. No, there's no telling it what color it's going to be. They just put in the content. It's completely separating content from display. But you also remove the easy parts of WordPress. Like, there are so many people out there using WordPress that have developed all of these different things, and you can't use any of them. You can't just plug something in and go with it. You can't just drop a theme in there. You can't use a builder. You can't use any of these things. The end users are going to get confused. In fact, I have an example I'm going to show you later. Not show you, but it is on the GitHub of what you can do to remove the things in WordPress that were normally options, but you don't want to confuse people, so you want to drop them. So if you're not an admin, you can't see a button that says themes, and you can't see one that says plugins, and you can't see any of these things, so they don't try to click on something like, well, I installed this thing, I don't know why it doesn't work. What's that? I'm talking about like the editors and authors of WordPress, basically. So if they go into the admin or subscribers or something, some lower down level, non-admin level, if they go in there and they try to click on buttons that are useless in this instance, they can't use them. They just make them disappear off the thing. So you're only having the upper admin being able to see, a theme or something like that in there. What's that?
So, if you, as someone who's content editor or author,
Right.
and I'm in WordPress, I'm using a WYSIWYG, and I do some styles, right? Like make this section of font bold or a specific color, or put an extra break in here, and I do all of that via the WYSIWYG. Does all of that get stripped out because it's
It will take as much as you want it to take. Gutenberg doesn't really let you do a lot of that stuff to the text anymore. You can strip all that stuff out of Gutenberg blocks. So they can use the really simple editor to say, this is a heading block, this is a paragraph block, make this bold, make this italic, make this a link. All that stuff stays. Obviously, if I paste a YouTube URL and it converts it to an iframe, that stays, that kind of block. But any of the other stuff that used to do with the tiny mice thing, you can just take that out and not give it to them, basically.
Well, I guess, I don't know, you said like the user can't like change colors and stuff like that.
Right.
But then like if you put like extra CSS and themes, that doesn't come in.
You can technically put it in there. Unless I strip it, it'll stay in there. But what you're doing is taking away the tools for them to do it super easy. Like they can't just drop some, use a little tiny minus editor to change the colors on certain things because that editor is not there anymore. It's Gutenberg. So Gutenberg gives you semantic things like heading, bold, paragraph, list item, that kind of thing. So those kind of blocks, but it doesn't give you that like double line thing anymore at the top that's like, I can adjust all of the font colors on this thing. It's just not there. It's not an option. Could they code it? Probably, but I'm trying to discourage them. No. Not if I disable it.
So then it does sound like there's still a lot of customization that goes into actually building the admin area for your users who are inputting content.
WordPress is going that way, though. That whole like switching editors thing, the classic plugin, people get that by installing the classic plugin. So if you don't have the ability to put in plugins there, you can't go back to classic. You're stuck with Gutenberg. So they have to learn how to use Gutenberg.
Okay, I guess I just feel like there's still a lot of work that goes into customizing the GUI to be used in this format, right? And then also like if you are like a large scale enterprise or something and you're making changes regularly, then there wouldn't be a circumstance where you spin up your WordPress, make these changes, and then spin it down. It would still just always be there because like you have employees who come in and log in every day and make changes. You know what I mean?
We did have this conversation like 2 hours ago about like, okay, so what if you spun it up and then spun it down? Like, do you tell all your editors they can only put stuff in there between 9 and 5 on Fridays?
And you don't have to run this with a static site generator, but not saying that that's what's going to slow you down. You can run. So I found a sweet tutorial, and there's a few other services that kind of prove this out as well, where you can have two different routes essentially. One route that has your built pages, and since you have access to still a GraphQL server that's running, you can get live changes as well. And if you just send those routes that way, and then your Gatsby app or your whatever app can still load things live. So her React instance, that was just live, but that won't give you the SEO that you like and different speed things. So if your content editors need to see those changes really quick, you can get live previews of those things. And Gatsby itself, actually, that's one of their business things, is they have that as a preview, or a preview as a service, kind of a bit. Yeah, but otherwise you're focusing on sending your styling and your front end work to your front end thing. So you have less control with what you do with your text there. I didn't realize that's a good point. So
The other thing you can do is that you can run the WordPress site off an internal server that's not actually on the internet. It's just available inside your own company, or it's on a, right. So people can continuously add their post, and every Sunday night they just do the build and all the stuff goes out, kind of thing.
Once a day.
Or once a day, or whatever it is, or continuous build, or doing the Jenkins thing, whatever it is. But you don't have to spin it down. Like, you can have it internally available. It's just not available to everybody. It's only available to your editors, kind of thing. So there's other options. It really depends on, you know, you might have a site that really is just going to stay static. So you build the whole thing over a, you know, 6-month period, and then you're done, and it's just static from then on, right? So I definitely think, though, that for the user experience, the stuff that I'm doing, like taking out a couple things on the sidebar is, you know, 4 lines in the functions file. It's not a big thing. The editor stuff, that's the way Gutenberg's going. It's just not going to have those options anymore. It's not going to have the, you can make it cutesy kind of thing. It's just not going to be there anymore. Because of the way they're separating content from style. But any other questions? No. The other thing, when you spin up and spin down, there's cron functions that happen with WordPress. There's updates, there's auto updates, stuff like that. If you spin it up and spin it down, those are not happening. Or if it's a file that, or it's a install that sits behind, you know, some internal wall, it's not going to be getting enough hits in order to do the automated functions. So you're going to have some way of triggering those. And then obviously looking at the type of site, because if you have a site, you know, someone wants to build out a membership site which has continuous signups and that kind of stuff, it might not be the best option. Although I have seen a really good kind of a Gatsby React thing for a membership site, but it didn't use WordPress credentials. It's using another credential client in order to make that work. So there's other options out there, but.
Is there a possibility that I could use Gatsby and build a separate backend, literally Google Sheets?
So I use Google Sheets as a backend, or as a service, or a GMS. And it's kind of a pain just because Google Scripts sucks. I'm not sure if anyone's ever tried to chew through their docs and like get those things figured out, but it works. And you can actually have forms post to a Google Doc or like to an Excel spreadsheet, and you can do all sorts of stuff like that. There's easier integrations. I have a few Airtable things. Those of you who've used that before, so yeah, so I have Airtable as a CMS that's working. And another place, I just have a AWS Lambda function that tells me it's almost out of the free tier every month for some reason. Anyway, that's just floating in space, and that can get hit as a proxy then to then paste your data wherever you want to. So there's kind of different ways around that. But then still coming back to the reason you want to keep WordPress headless is so you can have that content management like ability. Like it's a great editor. People have sort of tried, and there's these half-baked solutions that are okay, but nothing is that powerful and that intuitive to a user, and to a whole culture that's kind of built up around it. So there's a lot of workarounds, but still, you know, WordPress, if that's what you already have, then if it ain't broke.
I think from what it sounds like to me, this is just my opinion. If you have an existing WordPress site and you've spent a lot of time, money, and resources in developing this, and you're trying to go more of an SEO-friendly route because you want your pages to load faster and you don't want your front end to be so bulky, then this is the solution, because then you could convert all of that into really quick, snappy front-end marketing site that works, and you don't have to worry about migrating your WordPress database to some other system. In that case, that makes sense to me. Otherwise, though, I don't see why I would use WordPress at all. If I'm like building a new thing, I would 100% go like,
Hey, there's gonna
opposite direction, turn and run, don't look back.
So this is the only way Nicole and I have managed to stay friends is through this possibility. Otherwise, she's PHP and WordPress, and I.
Hard to react for all of 2 hours to make this thing.
Yeah, and so this has been my world. So yeah, so it's definitely, you're right. It's a great bridge, but we're not the only ones out there. So It's something that even like the Gatsby plugin for this has 33,000 downloads to hook into pre-existing WordPress sites. Like it's one of their big parts of their app that people are able to use. So.
Yeah, it's because I'm a developer. I can make things however I want. You know, I can run an entire site of HTML if I want to, because funsies. I don't know. Some of the stuff we talked about, though, it's because it's about the end users, or the not end users, authors, editors. What they understand, what can they use, what do they already know how to use. Is this easy for them to figure out? The move to Gutenberg was really painful, and I went through this with several hundred clients. So I know what it's like to try to train people on how to use something new and how they react to something if it's not working well and all this stuff like that. So, hey, if you guys can figure this out, great, let's stay with it. You also have sites that have been around for 10, 15 years, and now they have to come into the being, page speed better. So they have to change, or they want to, they've ballooned to such a size. Well, we started out small, this is a great idea, and then we ballooned to such a size, and now we have, 600,000 posts in here, and what the hell are we going to do now? So, it is the next evolution of what people are doing now, and there's not a right answer. There's 500 ways to do it. But I definitely think that from working with people who use WordPress, people who are writers and editors and those sort of people, I know what they are capable of and what they feel comfortable with, and keeping with something they already know how to use is great. So, anyways, I think that's it. Is it? Yes. So, our fearless leader who ditched us. No, I don't think that he copied the repository over to the web devs. Okay. So, you can find it on mine. There is just a repository for all the stuff that we went through, and the examples, and we have all the links to all the other stuff we were working on. If you want to play with it, there's so many links on there just for if you want to try it this way, if you want to try it this way, if you want to try it this way, it's all up there. You can find either of us on Slack, email, GitHub, something. But yeah, there's where it was. Anyways, I did post so many of the testing tools, links to the plugins I used, any of these, a bunch of videos if you want to walk through, I want to do this with Vue. There's a whole walkthrough of how to do it with Vue, and you can try all that stuff out. So it's pretty thorough. And then as soon as he emerges from the wedding that is not his own, it'll be copied over the web devs thing. But you can always find it there because there'll be a copy there too. Any other questions? Are we good? Okay, I think that's it.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, hey, shut up over there. So yeah, we'll have the GitHub forked and put into the Eugene Web Dev, and he'll send out an email when we have it. Hey. Hey, you too. And then we'll have the next meetup idea sent to you guys as well. Thank you for coming. Feel free to stick around, bother these people, hang out with them, ask questions and whatnot. Yeah, feel free. And there's more pizza, so eat more pizza, please. And that's it. Thank you, guys.